I realized recently that I've never called someone crazy. I've never like stopped and just thought like this person is insane, this person is crazy. And I came to this realization because I was doing a little thought experiment. I was thinking like, man, could you imagine if I just started yapping about like genetics and like how nonchalantly and casually I talk about like genetically analyzing people because it's the truth. But how if I were to go out and do that in normal life, people are gonna be like, he's so crazy, like he thinks so like weird, like he's weird, he's crazy, And I was thinking, that's interesting because I'm trying to imagine it from their perspective. And so I'm trying to put myself in their shoes and I'm thinking, well, from my personal experience, I actually don't remember a time where I've ever just deemed someone crazy. Usually what ends up happening is somebody articulates an idea or shows a thought process and I'm able to understand why they think that way. It's like, okay, I see the conclusion you're coming to is incorrect. Or I don't want to say incorrect because as Nietzsche says, the only thing we know is that we know nothing. But to simplify things, we'll just say that it's incorrect, that it's wrong. Like, I will recognize that an idea that someone articulates is wrong, and often it's because I've once thought that way too. But then I've graduated past that idea or thought process or philosophy. But still, I understand it. I understand it because I've traversed that alley before. I've been in that cave before. And I've then been further enlightened, and I've determined that that way of thinking, that idea was incorrect. It was wrong because I've been further enlightened, but nonetheless, I don't think they're crazy. I understand, like, I know where you're at in your journey. I know where you're at. I know why you're coming to this conclusion. And some people, they get stuck there depending on their IQ level or, just general intelligence as a whole. Some people will get stuck at a certain phase and they will not progress further. And I never call them crazy because I just understand. Like if someone says some wild conspiracy theory, I don't call them crazy. I see from their perspective, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, I saw that narrative floating around Twitter as well. I saw, why this seems to make sense on the surface. So I understand why you believe it so strongly, but I never think this person's crazy. Like it's never that dismissive mindset. Now, other times where it's more interesting, somebody will say something that is just so bizarre that, not just bizarre, but just so new that I can't understand how they came to that conclusion. I can't put my finger on how they got to that thought process. Usually I'm able to understand, okay, it makes sense why they think that way. But then someone will say something so new that I've never heard articulated before, and I just can't seem to put my finger on how they got there. And this is where I shut up and listen. I don't call them crazy and dismiss it. I listen. And it's not because they're right. It's not because I always assume for sure they must be more enlightened than me, because oftentimes they're not. But I have to understand how they got to that thought process. Like if somebody comes up to you and they say 2 + 2 is 5, initially, obviously, you're going to be like, this person is just playing with me. They're pretending to be crazy, right? Like your skepticism is going to kick in, like, oh, this person's, having fun playing an act. But if they're extremely convinced, 100%, they're trying to explain to you, you don't understand, and they start adding to it, adding more nuance to it that you don't understand the rationale behind, then it's like, okay, I need to understand how this individual got to this thought process. How did this individual get to this position where they're so determined in believing something that is so far off from our understanding of logic? And oftentimes, what will be the case is somebody will allude to having taken certain substances, for example, and then that makes sense. It's like, well, that person's not crazy. They just, their mind has been affected to be a little bit distorted from reality. And then it makes sense. It's like you understand why they're thinking that way, right? It's because their mind is a little bit altered, and they're not thinking with the typical logic. They're a little bit, like if they're taking a disassociative, they're like a little bit separated from reality, and that makes sense. That's one possibility. Another possibility is like someone read something or went down a rabbit hole online that that was like so convincing with so much material that just kept adding on to it more and more, and it's like some method of hypnosis on somebody. It's like I could understand why this material had this effect on that particular person. Like it makes sense why he eventually was convinced of this. You'll be reading through the material and you'll be like, I see what's going on here. Like I understand what happened to this guy. Like the trick may not work on you, but you understand how he got there. You understand that, and this is like on an extreme case. Remember, we're talking about 2 + 2 is 5, so you probably need some degree of hypnosis to achieve that. But that's not what you see on an everyday basis. What you see on an everyday basis is what we know as propaganda, right? This is where it gets interesting. Because what propaganda is, it's just a more realistic, less advanced, because it doesn't need to be that advanced, because convincing someone of like why, like some conspiracy theory or whatever, is very easy, because it very well could be based in reality. Something like 2 + 2 = 5, that's not based in reality. You're going to need a lot of advanced methods of manipulating the human mind. But nonetheless, you could still examine that material and reverse engineer it and understand, like, okay, I see how this individual came to this thought process. They're not crazy. They're a victim of their own mind, combined with them being exposed to that material. And we could get into a heritability snowballing conversation with that too, and how that's not just environmental. Remember their behavioral tendencies, which led them down that rabbit hole, are a big factor there. Like some people are very fascinated by conspiracy theories and they go down those rabbit holes, right? But what you see on an everyday basis very frequently all throughout is propaganda. So an example that just came to my head, I remember I was having breakfast at a hotel in Florida with my cousin early in the morning, and we were there past 10 a.m., but one of the ladies was so nice to us, and she would save breakfast for us after it would close, right? Such a sweetheart, so we would always talk to her. And one of the days, I guess after she got comfortable, she started yapping to us a little bit. And she particularly, she said, look out the window, look, see what they're doing? And she's pointing at like the trail, that the chemtrails that like these planes are leaving behind. And she was so extremely convinced of conspiracies related to these chemtrails. And I didn't think she was crazy at all. I don't think these people are crazy. You see, you just break it down and you understand. It's the same idea as why I'll never be afraid of the dark or afraid of anything. You just have to break it down and understand what is darkness. It's the absence of light photons. That's it. Why is this person thinking like this? Is it because they're crazy? No. It's because their mind was more susceptible to being convinced through material. So somebody had created the conspiracy and added sufficient evidence, added sufficient logical reasoning to convince a large demographic of people. And unfortunately, like a lot of those people, it's beyond their control. Once they're exposed to that certain material, it's out of their control. Again, we could talk about no free will and all, everything's deterministic, but even just from a genetic perspective, some people, it is just it's not their fault at all. You expose someone to a conspiracy theory and their mind is more susceptible to being convinced of it, they're gonna believe it. They're not crazy. It's just, I guess it depends how you define crazy, right? You know, I guess you could define crazy people as people who easily believe material, like people who easily believe things that are like designed to make them think a certain way, propaganda, right? I don't know. The way I understand the word crazy is being used most typically, though, it's like people are just very dismissal. People are like, oh, I can't believe like, what, you're crazy, you're insane, you know? And it's just very dismissal. But when I can't understand something, like when I hear someone say something that is just so bizarre, I always try to reverse engineer it. I'm always like, wait a second, like, because this person is like super convinced of it. How the fuck did this, how did they get to this conclusion? Like, why are they thinking this way? And again, it could be for a variety of reasons. Like maybe it's drugs. But again, like them being on drugs doesn't make them crazy. Like that's a rational response. Like it makes sense that their body is reacting in such a manner. It makes sense that their brain is not operating as it should. You know, it makes sense. So yeah, I've realized like, holy shit, I don't think I've ever called someone crazy in my life. Like I don't think I've ever... Oh, this is mad interesting. I think someone just called the cops on someone or something. Interesting. It's some worker talking to the police. I don't know. But we were wrapping up anyway. Yeah, that was the main point of this. You know, I just came to the realization. I never just dismiss anyone and just like say, oh, that person's crazy. Like I always reverse engineer the thought process, and I'm like, it makes sense. Like I understand why this person thinks this way, and oftentimes it's because I've once thought that way too, but I've since graduated past that thought process. You know, I'll be like, yes, I remember when I was 16 years old too, and I used to think that way. But I've since graduated beyond those ideas. Anyway, yeah. And I guess I did want to introduce that word again, graduate, to you guys. I use that a lot to articulate when you like become further enlightened out of a particular cave. You know, the allegory of the cave. Like, you've once been in that cave, right? And you've since graduated beyond that. You've since graduated to new ideas.